History is written in ink, but power is signed in shadows. Behind every empire, every war, every seismic shift in civilization, there is a contract, signed in silence, buried in archives, erased from memory. We remember kings and revolutions, battles and borders, but not the documents that made them possible, not the hidden deals, the forbidden alliances, the whispered promises between hands that never wanted to be seen. This is not about conspiracy. It's about control, and how the world we live in today was shaped not by what we were told, but by what was kept from us. There are contracts so old, their origins are forgotten. So secret, their content was never made public. And yet, they changed everything. From ancient temples and royal seals, to Vatican archives and corporate vaults. These are the threads that hold together the hidden structure of power. Some were signed with ink, others in blood, and some, perhaps, were never meant for human eyes at all. Take a moment to ask yourself, what if everything you know about the rise and fall of civilizations was incomplete? What if beneath every historic event, there was a signature, a pact? And what if those pacts were never broken, but simply forgotten? This isn't a story about documents. It's a story about intent, about the weight of promises made behind closed doors, and how they ripple through time. Because some contracts never expire. They simply go underground. Our journey begins not in a courtroom, but in a ruined monastery, where a faded scroll once dictated the fate of a continent. It continues through burned libraries, abandoned strongholds, and modern boardrooms that hide secrets behind polished glass. You've heard of the Treaty of Versailles, but have you heard of the Venetian Oath? The one whispered before Columbus ever set sail, promising lands that no one officially knew existed. You've read about the Cold War, but do you know the Blackstone Accords? A deal between powers that claimed to be enemies, but shared the same silent goal. These are not theories. They are contracts. Stamped, signed, hidden. Protected not by law, but by silence. And perhaps most chilling of all, some of these agreements weren't between nations, but between people and something else. There are ancient texts, sealed away, mislabeled, forbidden, that speak of covenants made with the Watchers. Deals struck not for wealth or land, but for knowledge. Knowledge that could fracture our understanding of reality, or elevate a civilization beyond the stars. But such knowledge always comes at a price. In the fine print, that's what was buried. As we open these forgotten contracts, we'll ask the questions others are afraid to. Who really won the wars? Who drew the borders? Who decided what we call history, and what we label myth? And most importantly, who's still holding the original copy? This is not speculation. This is reconstruction. We are piecing together the fragments, the lost pages, the erased signatures, to find a map of truth beneath the world we were told to accept. So join us as we dive into the archives no one dares open. Follow the paper trail, through time, through lies, through layers of silence. Because in the end, these contracts may not just explain the past. They may predict the future. And what you'll discover might change the way you see everything. There are contracts that shape history. And then, there are contracts that vanish from it. Pacts whispered beneath moonlight. Agreements carved not into paper, but into memory, into ritual, into silence. Long before modern treaties were inked and filed in archives, before nations had names, there were covenants between kings and priests, between tribes and spirits, between men and something else. Many of these ancient agreements are lost to time. Some were erased. Others were never meant to be remembered. But what if we could find them? What if these forgotten contracts hold the key to understanding the invisible scaffolding of our world? Let's go back. Not just centuries, but millennia. In southeastern Turkey lies a site that defies logic. Göbekli Tepe, predating Stonehenge by 6,000 years. This megalithic complex was built by people who, by all accounts, should not have had the tools, the organization, or the knowledge. And yet, they built stone circles weighing tons, perfectly aligned, covered in carvings of animals, symbols, and something stranger. Researchers believe Göbekli Tepe wasn't a city, but a temple, a place of ritual gathering. But why? What drove Neolithic hunter-gatherers to erect such a structure? Some say it was a contract, a covenant between early humanity and the divine. The carvings may not just be decorative. They might be clauses, conditions, a sacred pact etched in stone. And then, mysteriously, the site was buried. Intentionally. As if to hide, or protect, whatever was agreed upon. In the deserts of Mesopotamia, tablets have been uncovered, written in cuneiform, the first true script. Among them, references to the 7 kings who ruled before the flood. Their reigns stretched thousands of years. These kings were not quite human. They were appointed by the gods, and their rule was governed by a code not fully understood. A contract between gods and kings. That was broken. Then came the flood, and the kings vanished. But the contract remained, hidden in clay, scattered in ruins, awaiting the day someone might read its terms again. In the ancient Vedas of India, we find hymns not just of devotion, but of transaction. Agni, the fire god, was not merely worshipped. He was invoked to witness pacts. These weren't metaphors. They were literal contracts between mortals and deities. Offerings were made, words were spoken, and agreements were sealed with flame. It is said, "He who lies before Agni shall burn in this life or the next." The Vedic fire rituals, yajnas, served as the spiritual version of legal contracts. Each ritual, a binding promise. But here's the strange part. Some rituals invoke not known deities, but forgotten ones. Beings whose names have faded, but whose terms may still stand. Even today, there are Brahmin families that pass down untranslated chants, ritual scripts they are forbidden to alter, or even fully comprehend. Because some contracts, once sealed, can never be undone. Everyone knows of the Rosetta Stone, of the pyramids, of the Book of the Dead. But few know of the shadow treaties, buried in the crypts of Abydos. In the subterranean texts of Edfu are references to agreements with the Neteru, beings not of flesh, but of vibration or light. Priests were trained not just to serve the gods, but to negotiate. Contracts were spoken, not written. then sealed with sigils burned into papyrus. None of the originals survive, but the echoes remain. Some scholars believe the priesthoods of Egypt operated as intermediaries, not between pharaohs and gods, but between mankind and non-human entities. These were not prayers. They were agreements, terms, rules of engagement. And when those rules were broken, kingdoms fell. In ancient Greece, the Oracle of Delphi was not just a prophet. She was a witness. Every major city-state, from Athens to Sparta, made pilgrimages to consult her. But hidden beneath the layers of incense and riddles were binding declarations. The oracle's pronouncements were not just mystical visions, but political instruments, a way to seal agreements under divine authority. These were the original multilateral treaties. But with one difference: they were not always between humans. Some oracles referred to deals with gods, spirits, or otherworldly beings. Deals struck in sacred groves, or beneath moonlit skies, sealed with blood or breath. And if broken, the punishment was generational. The Druids of the Celtic world kept no written records. Their laws, their knowledge, their contracts were oral. Why? Because words live. And to bind a soul to a contract, the words must be spoken. There are legends of Druidic oaths sworn in sacred oak groves, of men who pledged fealty to forces beneath the soil, or stars above. These oaths were alive, not metaphors, living forces. If broken, the forest would know, the winds would whisper, and the earth would collect its due. In medieval records, Christian scribes wrote of strange rituals, where warriors would touch a black stone, speak ancient words, and walk away, changed. The pacts may be gone, but the echoes still tremble in the roots. Throughout the world's legends, we find a recurring theme. A human makes a deal with something older, stranger, darker. Deals for knowledge, for power, for love. Think of Faust. Think of the fisherman and the djinn. Think of the man who makes a wish and pays a price. Are these just stories, or memories of real contracts? In Romania, tales speak of the eel, spirit women of the forest. If you dance with them under moonlight, you are bound forever. In Slavic lands, the domovoi protects the home, but must be fed and honored. Fail, and the contract breaks, with dire consequences. Even modern ghost stories speak of haunted houses, where an agreement was violated, and the debt still unpaid. We like to think we've evolved, that we've moved past primitive deals and spirit contracts. But think again. Corporations draft NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, that silence truth. Governments sign secret accords hidden from public eyes. Private oaths between elites dictate wars, markets, destinies. And some believe these modern deals are not so different. There are whispers of old families who still honor ancient contracts, of cities built on ley lines chosen by geomancers, of secret lodges still invoking ancient names in candlelit rooms. Not all contracts are inked. Some are inherited. Some are sacrificed for. So we ask again, what were these forgotten contracts about? What was promised? What was the price? Were they peace treaties with the unseen? Trade agreements for wisdom? Oaths to bind the stars and soil together? Or warnings? Warnings not to dig too deep, not to ask too much, not to forget. Because every contract has two sides. And if one forgets the terms, the other may come to collect. In the darkest corners of history, there are texts that were never meant to be read. Books bound not only in leather and ink, but in secrecy, in fear, and in silence. They are the sealed books. Forgotten manuscripts and forbidden tomes. Locked away in vaults, catacombs, and cursed chambers. Some were hidden to protect the world. Others to protect us from their truths. Let us open these bindings. Page by page. Word by word. And discover what was never meant to survive. The year is 1229. A Benedictine monk is condemned for a sin so grave, his punishment is death. In a desperate bid to escape his fate, he makes a vow to write a book that contains all human knowledge. In a single night, that book would become the Codex Gigas, also known as the Devil's Bible. It is the largest surviving medieval manuscript in the world. Bound in leather, weighing over 165 pounds, over 620 pages long, and on one of those pages is a full-color portrait of the devil. Was it really written in a single night? Unlikely. But the legend persists. Because the Codex Gigas is more than just a book. It is a monolith of mystery. Within its pages are the Old and New Testaments, medical treatises, exorcism rituals, a calendar of the dead, and strange diagrams whose meaning is still debated today. What's missing are the intentions behind its creation. Was this monk preserving knowledge or invoking something? And why? In a religious manuscript, is there a demonic entity staring back at you? Long before modern psychology, there were whispers of a text that promised instant knowledge. A way to absorb entire fields of study without learning. That text was the Ars Notoria, the oldest part of the Lemegeton, the Lesser Key of Solomon. Unlike other grimoires, the Ars Notoria didn't summon demons. It sought divine contact, a bridge to angelic intelligence. Through a combination of complex prayers, sacred geometry, and ritual fasting, the reader could supposedly gain instant mastery of rhetoric, astronomy, logic, and more. But there was a warning. A price. Those who practiced the Ars Notoria often reported visions of eyes watching them from unseen corners, voices whispering at the edge of sleep, time slipping. Some went mad. Others vanished. The book exists. You can read it. But should you? From the sands of ancient Egypt comes a name, whispered in tombs and temples. Thoth, the god of writing, wisdom, and magic. It is said he wrote a book containing the secrets of the heavens and the underworld. A book so powerful, it granted the reader the ability to speak with animals, command the stars, and even resurrect the dead. This was the Book of Thoth. According to legend, the book was hidden in a locked chest, within a temple, beneath the Nile. Those who found it met terrible fates. Eyes gouged out, tongues torn, minds shattered. Was it myth? Or was the Book of Thoth something real? A coded tablet? A forbidden scroll? Some scholars believe fragments of it survive in Hermetic texts, or buried within tarot and alchemy. Others claim it was destroyed because its power was too great to be allowed. But every few decades, a reference resurfaces. A footnote in an old alchemical journal, a glyph in a forgotten tomb. The book calls, and someone always listens. Beneath the surface of Vatican City are miles of shelves, ancient scrolls, sealed papal orders, banned manuscripts, buried heresies. They call it the Vatican Apostolic Archive. For centuries, the Catholic Church collected everything. Not just Bibles and religious texts, but letters from kings, lost gospels, and banned writings. Why? Because knowledge is power, and some power must never leave its walls. Access is limited. Only a handful of researchers are allowed in. Most never get past the first request. What lies deeper? Some whisper of a letter written by Lucifer. Others, of Gospels written by Jesus himself, with teachings that would rewrite Christianity. But we may never know, because the deeper the truth, the tighter the seal. Some books are never found, because they disappear. Not burned, not lost, but removed. Erased from history, like they were never written. Take the Sibylline books, prophetic texts held in ancient Rome. 3 volumes of visions and omens, consulted only in times of crisis. In 83 BC, they burned. Deliberately. Because the Senate feared what they revealed. Or the Gospel of Eve, quoted by early Christian theologians, who condemned it as heresy. But no copies remain. Not even fragments. What did it say? Or the mysterious Voynich manuscript, a book written in an undecipherable language, filled with drawings of non-existent plants, star systems, rituals. To this day, no one has cracked its code. Perhaps it isn't meant to be read. Perhaps the message is hidden in the unreadable. Why seal a book? Why bury it? To protect the reader? Or to protect the truth? History is full of gaps. Stories that don't fit. Timelines that contradict. These books may be the missing pieces. Not myths. Not fables. But echoes of truths so disruptive. They had to be silenced. But every now and then, a page survives. A whisper. A glyph. A fragment in the dust. And when that happens, the veil lifts. Just a little. History loves simplicity. Clear battles, named enemies, crowned victors. But beneath the surface of what we are told, there lies a hidden web. Of alliances never written in textbooks. Of agreements formed in candlelit backrooms. Of names that were never meant to be remembered. These were not contracts of parchment and ink. They were spoken oaths. Handshakes in the dark. And promises sealed with silence. And together, they shaped the fate of nations. Let us enter this realm of the unrecorded. The forgotten. The invisible threads that move empires like marionettes. The Congress of Vienna. 1815. Europe is shattered by Napoleon's wars. Kings and ministers gather, not to rebuild peace, but to redesign control. What is remembered is the redrawing of borders. But what is forgotten is the private agreement beneath it all. A pact between monarchs to protect each other from their own people. If revolution rose in one country, the others would suppress it. Not for justice, but for preservation. This holy alliance between Russia, Austria, and Prussia was more than a treaty. It was a vow to crush liberty wherever it appeared. No matter the cause, no matter the cost. In public, it was wrapped in religion. In private, it was pure paranoia. And thus began a century of shadow suppression. (1916) World War I still rages. The Ottoman Empire is collapsing. In the shadows, Britain and France make a secret deal. They will divide the Middle East between themselves. The Sykes-Picot Agreement, a contract of lines on maps, drawn by men who had never set foot in the deserts they claimed. They promised independence to the Arabs, but gave them partition. They promised peace, but sowed the seeds of endless war. Why is this important? Because that map still shapes modern conflicts. Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Jordan. Borders drawn in ignorance, held in place by blood. The original copy was hidden, even from the Arab leaders who fought beside the Allies. It was only exposed when the Bolsheviks found it and leaked it to the world. By then, it was too late. The betrayal was already inked in sand. Revolutions seem spontaneous. Masses rise. Flags wave. Regimes fall. But history whispers a darker truth. Behind many uprisings, there are societies, networks of influence, of wealth, and ideology. Not always seen, not always named, but always there. The Carbonari in Italy, the Freemasons in France, the Tertulias in Spain, even the Sons of Liberty in early America. They met in back rooms, taverns, libraries, planning change long before the people took to the streets. Some wanted freedom, others wanted power, but they understood one truth. Revolutions are not started by crowds. They are started by whispers. Today, we celebrate the flames, but forget the ones who struck the match. August 1939. In a quiet lab, a letter is written. It's signed by Albert Einstein, but the ideas are from Leo Szilard. They warn President Roosevelt. Nazi Germany may be developing atomic weapons. 2 months later, the Manhattan Project begins. But what's forgotten is not the bomb. It's the deal. The deal between scientists and generals, between physics and war. A deal where knowledge was traded for urgency. The brightest minds of a generation gave their gifts to the darkest pursuit, not because they wanted to, but because they feared who would get there first. After Hiroshima, many were horrified. Oppenheimer quoted the Bhagavad Gita. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." But the world had already changed, and no one could take it back. How did Hitler fund his rise? Not just with speeches, not just with nationalism, but with money. And some of it came from unexpected places. Swiss banks, British businessmen, even American industrialists. Some supported him ideologically, others economically. A few simply wanted to profit from war. There were meetings, loans, shell companies, all carefully hidden. After the war, many of these deals were buried. Some names quietly erased from records. Others became respected figures. But paper trails remain. Memos, invoices, transfers. A reminder that ideology may start wars, but money fuels them. After World War II, alliances changed. Empires collapsed. But new networks formed. Not on maps, but in whispers. Intelligence agencies, private think tanks, corporate coalitions. The Cold War was not just East versus West. It was Web versus Web. CIA, KGB, MI6, Mossad. They formed alliances beyond borders, trained one another, fought through proxies, and signed unspoken agreements. Not in public, not in ink, but in actions. Coups in Iran, assassinations in Congo, funding of insurgents, control of narrative. This was not diplomacy. This was a game with no rules. And it is still being played. Not the victors. Not always. Sometimes it's the silent ones. The ones who never speak. The ones who erase their own names. These forgotten alliances. These shadow pacts. They built the scaffolding of our world. But like scaffolding, they are meant to be invisible. Until you look closely. Until you see the bolts, the rust, the fingerprints. Then you understand. History was not written. It was constructed. Carefully. Secretly. And never finished. And the ones who truly shaped it, they're the ones no one remembers. Some doors are never meant to be opened. Some vaults remain sealed, not by accident, but by design. Throughout history, we've heard whispers of secret archives, libraries deep beneath the surface, hidden rooms within government buildings, forbidden collections held by those in power, not for safekeeping, but for control. Control of information, control of memory, control of truth. The most famous of these is the Vatican Apostolic Archive, formerly called the Secret Archive, not because it was fictional, but because it was real, and off limits to nearly everyone. For centuries, the Vatican kept millions of documents sealed from public view. Over 50 miles of shelving. Texts from emperors, popes, kings. Letters, treaties, manuscripts. Even writings that challenge the foundation of modern faith. Only a handful of scholars are granted access each year. And even they are only allowed to see specific folders, under supervision, with no right to browse freely. So what's inside those halls of silence? Some claim it holds letters from Jesus himself. Others believe the original texts of banned Gospels, like those of Mary Magdalene or Judas, are hidden within. Scrolls that paint a different picture of early Christianity. A different story of who we are. But the Vatican is not alone. Governments, too, have built their own labyrinths. Vaults where history is not recorded, but erased. In the United States, the National Archives house millions of declassified documents, but many more remain locked away under strict classification levels. Some files are sealed for 25, 50, even 100 years. Why? Because their contents are considered too sensitive. Not for security, but for narrative. Files on covert operations in Latin America. Deals with dictators. Experiments on civilians. All stored away in dark basements, protected by bureaucracy and law. In Russia, the situation is even more opaque. Many Soviet-era files have simply disappeared, or were never cataloged at all. Entire eras of political terror vanished from the official record, as if they never happened. Is it to protect society from dangerous truths? Or to protect power from accountability? History, they say, is written by the victors. But perhaps more accurately, history is written by the archivists. By those who decide what gets stored and what gets shredded. Even in ancient times, knowledge was hidden intentionally. In Egypt, there were secret halls beneath temples. In Mesopotamia, clay tablets were buried in ceremonial caches. In Tibet, sky burial scrolls were wrapped in silk and hidden in mountains, waiting for a future generation, capable and willing to understand them. In Portugal, beneath the Mafra Palace, lies a royal library filled with forbidden books. Some bound in human skin, some never published. Books on alchemy, necromancy, summoning. Locked in cages, literally. In Iran, rumors swirl about sealed archives beneath ancient Zoroastrian temples. Texts that describe star charts from before the flood. And machines of light that once moved across the sky. In China, entire volumes from the Han Dynasty were destroyed. But some say a portion was saved, moved into underground chambers beneath Mount Song, where only the worthy may tread. And then there's Room 40, the British Wartime Cryptography Office, whose documents, tied to intelligence, betrayal, and coded prophecy, have never been fully disclosed. In the digital age, archives are no longer behind locked doors. They're behind passwords, behind encrypted servers, behind layers of classification no one understands, even insiders. Governments now erase memory in real time. With AI, with filters, with blacklists. What was once burned on paper is now deleted digitally, as if it never existed. What kind of truths are so dangerous? They must be hidden for centuries? Do they speak of past cataclysms? Of non-human origins? Of humanity's role in a much older story? And what if some of these archives aren't even human? What if deep in the earth, or orbiting above us, lie records, kept not by kings, but by watchers? Some believe the moon is an archive, that its hollowness is not natural, but constructed, a vault of memory from civilizations lost. Others point to the Hall of Records beneath the Sphinx, still unexcavated, still off limits. Every once in a while, something leaks. A document, a photograph, a forgotten letter. And in that moment, a glimpse of truth escapes. In 2001, a Vatican document surfaced describing extraterrestrial theology. In 1995, secret CIA files revealed experiments with remote viewing. In 2023, leaked footage from an Arctic base showed unidentified symbols beneath melting ice. Each time, the world blinks and then moves on. Because we're trained to forget, to dismiss, to obey. They do not blink. They do not forget. They hold what we've lost, what we've hidden, what we were told never existed. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday, those doors will open, and the truth will walk out, unfolded, page by page, not to destroy us, but to finally set us free. Cyclone, because knowledge, no matter how deeply buried, never truly dies. We've wandered through the corridors of forgotten deals, unsealed the bindings of forbidden texts, and brushed our hands against the dust of ancient contracts buried beneath time itself. But now comes the hardest question. What happens if it's all true? What happens when the ink of those long-lost agreements begins to bleed through the pages of history? When the shadows that once guarded them start to thin, and the world begins to remember what it was never meant to know? Truth is not just revelation. It's upheaval. Because when hidden truths emerge, they rewrite everything. Imagine this. A sealed vault beneath the Vatican is opened. Inside, a scroll. Ancient. Undeniably authentic. It details a pact between two empires. One known, one erased. Its clauses challenge the very foundations of modern law, politics, religion. And suddenly, everything trembles. Because forgotten contracts aren't just relics. They are time bombs. If a document proves that land ownership, sovereignty, or power was based on falsified records, what does that do to the structure we live in today? Who has to step down? Who rises from the ashes of the lie? And if a treaty signed with a non-human intelligence were ever to be unearthed, even just hinted at, would governments collapse under the weight of disclosure? Would religions fracture? Would the veil finally tear? They say history is written by the victors. But what if the victors weren't meant to win? What if their victory was forged, contracted, through manipulation, secrecy, or something even darker? The world is not built on truth. It is built on agreement, on belief, on contracts, visible or hidden, that decide what we're allowed to see. And those contracts are beginning to crack. In every corner of the earth, secrets strain against their seals. Digital leaks, recovered scrolls, decrypted symbols, all whispering the same thing. You were not told everything. Take, for example, the hidden clauses of post-war treaties. What if they included arrangements not meant for human eyes? Deals signed not in conference halls, but in shadowed chambers. Over artifacts, over knowledge, over access? What if the real reason some ancient sites remain off-limits is not preservation, but containment? The contracts weren't just with kings and conquerors, but with something older. Something we no longer have a name for. And now, we're beginning to remember. Across deserts and tundras, beneath jungles and ice, structures are rising from the forgotten. Vaults are being breached. Languages are being decoded. And with each discovery, a piece of the forbidden puzzle is returned to the table. The people who wrote these contracts, who bound the knowledge, They believed it needed protection. Or maybe, control. But time doesn't honor secrecy. Time reveals. And the contracts of the past are running out of time. So what happens next? Some will panic. Governments may censor. Institutions may deny. But the truth seeps through. We may begin to see our world differently. Not as a linear climb from savagery to civilization, but as a circle of rise and fall, of knowledge gained and hidden and gained again. We may have to face the possibility that we are not the first advanced culture, nor the only ones who signed deals in desperation, or ambition, or fear. And when that realization spreads, when people begin to ask why the truth was buried, and by whom, everything changes. History becomes alive again. A battlefield of competing versions. A war of narratives. The true and the false no longer separated by time, but colliding in the present. And in that chaos lies an opportunity to choose differently. We can see the mistakes they made, the deals that led to destruction, oppression, erasure. And we can ask ourselves, do we want to make those same pacts again? Or do we chart a new course? Because the forbidden contracts weren't just history. They were warnings. Signed in desperation. Buried in shame. And now, exhumed in the Age of Awakening. And here's the strangest part of all. What if we are the fulfillment of those contracts? What if they were not meant to be opened until now? What if their terms were written for us? The dates, the symbols, the coordinates, the timings encoded in stone and starlight. They all point to this moment. To us. Maybe we are the claws they feared. Or the hope they left behind. Maybe the final contract isn't in a vault, but in us. In our ability to question, to seek, to remember. The veils are lifting. The records are stirring. And the silence is breaking. So ask yourself, what happens when the truth emerges? Will you turn away? Or will you step into the contract that was always waiting for you? This is the beginning of remembering. And remembering changes everything.